Okay, it looks like we are live here. This is kind of a more informal show than usually you see for a Penn State Voice of College Football show. Okay, like, oh, oops, I had the YouTube channel on. That's why I hear the echo. Yeah, this is gonna be a more informal show. Tim Made and Marty Lee from Black Shoe Diaries.com, per usual, here in the Voice of College Football, Mark Rogers TV. Uh, we're just here to just talk about kind of live discussion. So anyone tuning in, feel free to throw in some questions, comments, and we'll answer it as best as we can. But we got a few items on our agenda. Just obviously the Rose Bowl. Penn State will be playing Utah on that January 2nd. Talk about that and just how the importance of the game, just what to expect, and amongst other things, and also transfer portal, recruiting, all the craziness involved in all of that, and maybe last but not least, shout out to the basketball team. Got themselves a nice big upset win on the road today at 17th ranked Illinois, and I mean not only just eked one out. I mean they beat them by 15 points on the road. It was like just like a statement kind of win, and it's especially needed after losing what seemed like on paper a very winnable game against Michigan State the other night. And I say winnable because Michigan State was kind of struggling going into that game. They were missing a couple guys due to injury. They were definitely ripe for the picking, and Penn State couldn't take advantage. So knowing that Illinois, a road trip to Illinois is on the schedule, it kind of felt like Penn State was going to find themselves in an 0-2 hole in Big Ten conference play to start out, but that's not the case. Now they're back to 500, and now you got a manageable 3-game slate with Canisius and Quinnipiac, Delaware State coming up to finish out December before you go back into Big Ten play, the remainder of Big Ten play, which will culminate with a New Year's Day home game against Iowa. So, Marty, obviously, you two are like me, big Penn State hoops fan. Just when you thought you were out, they reel you back in, and now all of a sudden you're thinking NCAA tournament again, possibly.
Yeah, coming into the season, I thought Penn State would make the NCAA tournament, and just to be in a position where you're predicting Penn State to make the NCAA tournament is a pretty big deal in Happy Valley, honestly. But yeah, great win today. One of the biggest wins, in my opinion, at least one of the biggest wins of the Micah Shrewsbury era to this point, because of how much it could potentially mean come March, like you said, and to bounce back after. I mean, this was definitely an opportunity that you don't get very often. They could have had earlier in the week to kind of kick Sparty while they were down, and they failed to do so. But a big bounce back win. Should win your next few games before you get back into Big Ten play at the first of the year. So, Penn State's probably looking at when the calendar flips to January 1st, being 10-3, already having a road conference victory over a top 20 team, a few other wins against potential tournament teams in non-conference play also. And, as a Penn State basketball fan, you could not ask for much more on January 1st. So that things definitely trending in a good direction for Penn State basketball. Just a huge win today. I mean, they're a team, they're going to live and die by the three. They're the ability of big men will hurt them for a lot of the year until some young guys kind of develop and come along. But it's a good basketball team. And like I said, I think it's a team that is more than capable of making the NCAA tournament.
Certainly, it'll be something to watch. Of course, I know this is a college football channel, and we don't mean to get you all bogged too much into basketball talk, at least not at this point. But we just had to talk about that very briefly. Of course, the other big thing is Penn State. Since we last did this show, Penn State found out they're playing in the Rose Bowl against Utah, who just played in the Rose Bowl last year against Ohio State. A game where they got up early in the Buckeyes by a couple touchdowns, but then OSU came roaring back, ultimately kicked the game-winning field goal in the final seconds. Um, I've done a little bit of research in this game, and it looks like, just from what I've seen, it's this on paper is looking like a good, evenly matched game. You got two teams; they both value a strong run game. They both have strong defenses. Neither team has like a real deep threat at receiver, but they're capable enough in the passing game to do some damage. So, I guess what's your initial thoughts? Just first when you found out that Penn State was in the Rose Bowl, and also just finding out they're going to be playing Utah.
I mean, first off, with the Rose Bowl, to me, the Rose Bowl is without a doubt still college football royalty. If you're not going to make the playoff, there is nothing better than the Rose Bowl. I have come to find over the years too that for people such as myself who grew up in, or in my case, have spent my entire life living in Big Ten country, the Rose Bowl really does mean something else. It's a special thing. Like it's not truly a new year in America until you have that second half kicking off and that sunset's rolling in over the San Gabriel Mountains, and it's perfection. Everything about the game, everything about the traditions, the Rose Parade, all of it. It's the best, man. And not just to be in it, but to be in it in a year where I think a lot of people thought 8-4, 9-3 was going to be this team's ceiling, and to be playing in what is going to be the final traditional Rose Bowl before the play, because next year the Rose Bowl is part of the playoff, and the following year the playoff expands to 12 teams. So this is going to be that final true traditional Pac-12 versus Big Ten Rose Bowl, something that's been a staple in college football for over 100 years, something that generation after generation of college football fan grew up living with. To play in the last one of those is pretty awesome also. As for Utah, I mean, I think this is going into last weekend, all signs pointed towards Penn State winding up in the Rose Bowl, and barring Purdue upsetting Michigan and getting a bid. And at first looked like they were going to play Washington, and I think Washington would have been a better matchup per se for Penn State, but the Utah one is one that excites me more as a fan, partially because we did just play Washington a few years ago in the Fiesta Bowl, and Penn State's never played Utah before, so that's a cool little caveat also. I think with Utah, people think of physicality in the trenches. They think of the offensive and defensive lines. That's what you're going to get with a Kyle Whittingham team. Now, I will say this Utah team is probably not quite as good in the trenches as they have been some past years. And that could bode well for Penn State, who, is better in the trenches this year than they've been in quite a while, especially with the offensive line. Cam Rising, excuse me, in a lot of ways, Cam Rising almost reminds me of Trace McSorley, because he's a guy who you watch him play and he doesn't necessarily have any of these just great physical traits or anything of the sort, but
he's a winner.
Yeah, he makes plays. He's a winner. That play against USC where he scrambles and gets blown up and just hops right back up. It's the kid finds ways to win. He's a tough competitor. He's got that dog in him, as they would say. So I think that'll be a fun matchup, watching Manny Diaz and his defense go up against Cam Rising. And, for Penn State too, to me, getting to 10 wins, it's also very much how you got there. The fact that, you finished the year not just winning 4 games in a row, but absolutely eviscerating 3 of those 4 teams, and even Michigan State. I mean, it got a little hairy at points in the fourth quarter, but you still won by 3 scores against the Spartans. And then you rode those wins were happening as you were watching so many of these young guys develop, so many of these guys who are going to be back next year make strides. I mean, from Abdul Carter to Nick Singleton to Katron Allen, Keandre Lambert-Smith, I would not be surprised at all to see the Rose Bowl kind of be his coming out party after he finished the year really strong. These young offensive linemen, even some of the guys, like a Chop Robinson or an Adiza Isaac who's coming back from injury, seeing so many guys who are going to be vital for this team in 2023 and 2024 finish the year strong as Penn State was finishing the year strong is part of what makes this 10-2 so much different than I was talking with some friends of mine about this. You go back to 2017, for example, and this team went 10-2, went to the Fiesta Bowl, beat Washington. A really good season. That 10-2 felt so much different though, because you kind of knew that was the last hurrah for that group of players. For Trace, Trace had another year, but you knew Saquon was gone. You knew Mike Gesicki, Deshaun Hamilton, DeAndre Tompkins. You knew a lot of those guys were gone after that year. Marcus Allen, like that was the last hurrah, and that 10-2 kind of felt disappointing. This
But
10
you
and
thought they
2 is
were going to be a
completely
playoff team too, the way they
yeah,
were playing in the first half of the season. And
exactly.
frankly, in the first, well, for a while, at least against Ohio State, it looked like they were going to maybe solidify themselves as a playoff team before JT Barrett turned into a video game in the second half.
Yeah, and to me, this is just so much different because you didn't come into the season with those expectations, first and foremost. And secondly, like I said, the window isn't closing on a group the way it was with that 2017 group. This window is just opening. The bulk of this team is back next year. And honestly, you could argue that the two best players on your roster in Abdul Carter and Nick Singleton are, both have to play at least two more seasons. So there's a lot there to be excited about if you're a Penn State fan, win or lose in Pasadena. No matter what, Penn State could come out and lose that game 40-15, and they will still go into the offseason with so much buzz and hype and excitement like we haven't seen around this program since they had going into 2017 and through the first half of that 2017 season. I remember when they walked off against Iowa that year, and coming out of that game, things were kind of really at a fever pitch for Penn State because you're ranked number 2 or 3 in the country, whatever it was. You just went into Kinnick, won a just absolute instant classic against a very good Iowa team. And after that game, I just remember, there was so much hype, so much excitement around this program as a whole. And you're going to see very similar things this offseason, no matter what happens on the second.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's not a blowout, well, a loss in general, let alone a blowout loss. Obviously, I think the line, I thought I saw it originally Utah opened as 1.5 point favorites, or was it Penn State?
I thought if I remember correctly, Penn State opened as 1.5 point favorites. It has since swung to 1.5 point favorite of Utah. So essentially, it's a pick'em game. And when you're going into any bowl game, especially something like the Rose Bowl, you can't ask for much more than that because it just shows that you have two very good, evenly matched teams. In my opinion, Penn State and Utah are two of the 10 best teams in the country. So it should be setting up for a really good contest as well.
All right, got some commenters in the chat. Willie says, looking forward to a great Rose Bowl. Hope Penn State wins for the Big Ten. Yes, Willie, right there with you. Oh, good question, Willie. How many players are sitting out? I saw Joey Porter Jr. is out. Parker Washington, I know, just announced last night that he's going to enter the NFL draft, and he was already out for the year anyway because of injury. So I guess I can't say he was sitting out. He's already out anyway because of injury. But I guess if he was healthy, maybe he would have opted out of this, perhaps. I don't know. It is the Rose Bowl, and none of these guys were on the team last time Penn State went to the Rose Bowl 6 years ago. So not even Sean Clifford. So we'll have to. So maybe he would have if he was healthy, but I don't know. But yeah, besides Porter Jr., I don't know anyone else who has opted out yet.
Yeah, I know I haven't seen anything else either. And I know there was a lot of opt-outs last year, but when you're 7-5 going into the Outback Bowl in a season that everybody was just very ready to have be over, that's going to be totally different. You look at the Cotton Bowl, you look at the Rose Bowl, you look at that Fiesta Bowl, and the opt-outs weren't there. I do think playing a New Year's Six Bowl change, especially the Rose Bowl. You go back to that 2017 season again, that Fiesta Bowl against Washington, and you had Saquon Barkley, who had absolutely nothing at all to prove. He was on a limited basis, but he still played in that game and had a big impact at that long touchdown run. Excuse me. So I don't expect a ton of opt-outs. I know Sean Fitz of On3, and for those if you're a Penn State fan, obviously you know who Sean Fitz is. If you do not, there's probably no one in the world more dialed in and more connected to Penn State football, other than probably James Franklin himself, than Sean Fitz. And Fitz is also said that he believes, with it being the Rose Bowl and a bowl of this magnitude, that he doesn't expect there to be very many opt-outs in addition to Porter Jr. So that should also, again, bode well for not just Penn State's odds to win the game, but for it being a close, competitive, good game.
I think so. And I have the England France World Cup match streaming on my phone here since I can't easily look down on my TV from the loft up here. Feel free if you got anything you want to say about the World Cup, also chime in on that.
That's a brutal loss for Brazil yesterday. Just brutal.
Well, France is up 2-1 in England. It's 84th minute as we're talking here, and England just missed on a penalty kick to tie it. So that may have been probably their best chance. That
is.
Anywhere Whittingham and Rising. We just talked about Cam Rising, how dangerous he's a guy, and I think I'm sure Manny Diaz will make sure Abdul Carter's probably spying on him because he is a dual threat guy. He can use his legs to pick up first downs. So definitely gotta know where he is at all times and get pressure on him. Kyle Williams. These guys been there. He took over when Urban Meyer left for Florida, and that was, end of 2004, like 2005 season. So guys like a Utah lifer at this point, and he's been with that program when they were still in, I think it was the Mountain West Conference they were in before they went to the Pac-12.
Correct.
So he's overseen them from being, mid Mountain West, group, non-power program to now into being a P5 school. And they've made a pretty smooth transition into that. He's, obviously, Utah, doesn't have like maybe the richest of football histories, but he's certainly helped, I think, maybe make the program a little more nationally relevant with the success he's been having in recent years, including this year. And frankly, it was pretty impressive what they did to USC in the Pac-12 championship game. It's a team that they upset at home earlier in the season, and you're thinking, all right, well, USC's got revenge on their minds. They'll probably go take it out on Utah. And ultimately, that's how it was panning out in the beginning. I think it was like 17-3 USC early on or something like that. And then, Utah just kind of collected themselves and just started pasting USC going forward. It definitely helped that Caleb Williams got hobbled and was ineffective, but man, the way they just exploited USC's defense was a solid coaching job and just good execution from the players they've got there. So this will certainly be a test, and a good test. This will be like, so I remember the last couple, well, especially the 2008 the Rose Bowl in 2008 season. USC was a favorite for a reason, and it showed. They just were just a more talented team, and especially that offense was just too much for the Penn State secondary to handle.
Made Mark Sanchez a first-round pick that day. But to this day, Mark Sanchez owes Tom Bradley a lot of money.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, Marty. I was about to say. And then the one 6 years ago, that was, USC was a favorite. It maybe wasn't as, it was expected to be a more competitive game, I think. And Penn State, they fought back. They got down. They were down a couple touchdowns early, but they fought back. And then just that early second half, those barrage of scores. You had Saquon Barkley's pinball-like touchdown run. We're just like hitting the juke button multiple times. And then on his way to the end zone. And then you had Chris Godwin with the catch that originally was deflected by the USC defender. And then, which took the end zone. And then that was followed by a tipped interception deep in USC's territory, which then turned into another touchdown for Penn State shortly after. So all of a sudden it's like a 2-touchdown lead for Penn State, and they're in control. But I guess maybe they got a little too conservative or what, but and also the defense wasn't able to really get much of a pass rush on SC at all. So Sam Darnold had probably like 5-6 seconds to throw the ball every time, and you give a quarterback that much time, they're going to find somebody. So, ultimately, they lost that in a last-second field goal. And I happened to be at those last 2 Rose Bowls, and so suffice it to say, I'm not going to be there this time. So I realize I'm a bad luck charm. So I'll just be watching from the confines of my home, and hopefully they can get their second ever Rose Bowl win, first one since they beat Oregon in the '95 Rose Bowl.
Yeah, you mentioned that 2008 game, and I always felt in 2008 that USC was the best team in the country that year, in my opinion. How to this day I'll never figure out how they managed to lose twice along the way. But that was just a game that I think the final score was 38-28, but it was never that competitive. Penn State got some garbage points late, but that 2016 game, man, obviously you want to win, but if you're going to lose, you might as well. That's a hell of a way to do it, because that was an instant classic, one of the best Rose Bowls ever. Georgia and Oklahoma the following year may have outdid it, but at least in my lifetime, those two and Vince Young taking down USC are the 3 greatest Rose Bowls I've ever watched. So, even if you lose, if you're going to lose, you might as well do it an instant classic, because that game still provided so many great moments. You mentioned Saquon's touchdown run. To me, that is one of the 5 greatest individual efforts I've ever witnessed in a football game. It was just unbelievable. And I think some of it too, it goes to show the specialness and that sort of thing of the Rose Bowl, because that game being played in Pasadena, it really, from Saquon's run, you mentioned the Godwin catch, that interception that Brandon Bell had that I feel like gets forgotten, that may have been the single biggest play of that game, because Bell broke his arm on the return and missed the rest of the game. And I don't think Penn State's defense completely implodes down the stretch the way it did if Bell's still out there. There were so many just plays in that game. The winning field goal by USC's, the clock's at 0, that if it's not the Rose Bowl, they don't carry that kind of same prestige and all of that sort of thing. But yeah, that was a hell of a game. Hopefully this year, things are going to go in Penn State's favor. But yeah, the Nittany Lions they set the bar high the first time James Franklin took this team to the Rose Bowl in terms of just watchability. And I can't imagine what it was like watching that game as just a college football fan who was not a Penn State or USC fan, having no dog in the fight. So, hopefully we'll get something similar this year, just this time with the Nittany Lions coming out on top. And, this would be something we'll talk about in the postgame show if they do win. But if they win this thing, I think you've got to start discussing it as probably one of the 3 or 4 best wins James Franklin's had at Penn State. Up there with his Big Ten championship, up there with beating Ohio State in 2016. So it would be one of the best wins that he's had. And, if you do win it, it's going to go down as, without a doubt, no matter how it ends, it's going to go down as one of the more memorable games in program history, again, because it is the Rose Bowl, and that does mean something more still.
Because we still talk about that '95 Rose Bowl win over Oregon, even though, unfortunately, back then there was no playoff or BCS or anything to, have a 1 versus 2 game. So Penn State unfortunately got shut out of a national championship because it was all down to the voters, who both, APN coaches both had Nebraska number 1, and then solidified that the night before the Rose Bowl when they beat Miami in the Orange Bowl. But still, it was just a satisfying enough win. Solidified an undefeated season, which to this day remains their last undefeated season. I guess a little sentimental value to me, because that was actually the very first year I started going to games as a kid. That's when my dad got season tickets. And so that's a heck of a way to start, your Beaver Stadium going experience with the '94 season. But, I think also just maybe who was part of that team, just, Kerry Collins, Kajana Carter, Bob Ingham, Freddie Scott. And then, of course, the iconic first play from scrimmage for Penn State, Kajana Carter just bust through a pile. And funny enough, I don't know if you've ever heard, I think it's Keith Conlon, Goon, as they call him, who described that game. That play where Kajana Carter runs 83 yards to the end zone, first play, everyone in the O-line blocked the wrong person. Like none of them, they all missed their assignments. They were all blocking the wrong guy. And yet Kajana Carter just kind of busts through the pile and just breaks out on the other side. There's nobody there to, the secondary to help. So he's gone. It's kind of an iconic image for me personally.
And I think that's funny too, because it just truly goes to show. I feel like Kajana Carter's a guy people don't appreciate how great he really was because of his health issues when he got to the NFL. But the fact that the entire offensive line blocked that play wrong and it still went down as one of the most iconic touchdown runs in program history and in Rose Bowl history just truly goes to show the greatness of Kajana Carter and what a tremendous running back he was before his knees gave out on him.
Precisely. But I do think win or lose, yeah, I agree. I think regardless what the outcome of the game, Rose Bowl is, the off-season hype train is already boarding right now for 2023. And it'll be leaving the station after January 2nd. So, hop on board while you still can. But of course, winning would really just intensify the hype even further going into the off season. Rose Bowl champs, and you're returning a Rose Bowl champion team that's returning the bulk of the guys who helped them get there and helped them win that game. So I kind of, I mentioned I'm watching this World Cup match on my phone here, but I'm making an analogy here. It's kind of like the U.S. soccer team, youngest team in the World Cup on average, and they got out of group play, got to the knockout stage. They were kind of overmatched against a more experienced, talented Netherlands side, but just to for a team that had missed the previous World Cup and was coming in kind of raw, it was good to see them get as far as they did, and it sets up nicely for 4 years from now when the U.S. will be hosting jointly with Mexico and Canada. These guys will have matured and probably be peaking at the right time, and chance to make perhaps the greatest run in the country's history in 4 years. And likewise with the Penn State, the football team here, it's a very young team. Most of the key guys have at least one more year, some cases 2 years, like, the running backs, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, and of course, Abdul Carter, linebacker. And then, of course, you got Drew Aller, who will be starting at quarterback next season. So, a lot to look forward to. And, the fact that that they're sitting here going to the Rose Bowl of 10 wins already, it's a very positive sign. It bodes well for the future. And you look at that schedule going into next year, it's a pretty manageable one on paper. And, it's also still going to be a 14 playoff next year. So it certainly is set up for them to be undefeated going into Ohio State in late October. And, that could be an interesting game depending on how Ohio State is next year. But, given how Penn State kind of pushed them to the brink this year, it's only a game you think they can do so again, and perhaps maybe this time actually get over the hump. We'll see, but got that. But the nice thing is too, but after Ohio State, you got a couple opponents in between it, being Indiana and Maryland, before you have to play Michigan at home. So it's not like you got to play Ohio State, Michigan like back-to-back weeks, or like 2 weeks apart.
2 out of 3, yeah. But yeah, you look to next year, that schedule sets up really nicely for Penn State. I mean, like you said, there's no reason they shouldn't be undefeated whenever they go to Columbus, and getting Michigan a little bit later in the year then and getting them at home will be big as well. With the hype, it's going to be high regardless. And you look to the transfer portal and you look there, and that has a chance for the hype really to just continue to grow. I mean, right now, Dante Cephas, who might be the best receiver in the portal from Kent State, currently on an official visit to campus. There's some buzz that he'll leave campus, committed to the Nittany Lions. If you can add a player or two like that, I mean, I expect him to be very aggressive in the portal, wide receiver. You have former Penn State commit and former Oregon Duck Dante Thornton, who averaged 20 yards a catch last year in the portal as well. Receiver that Penn State seems to be in a good spot for. So, you bring in a couple of those guys, mix and match some other places for some depth, maybe cornerback, maybe defensive tackle, and that just feeds further into the hype. Because, if you look to next year, really the only questions you're going to have about this offense is going to be wide receiver. And when you have a quarterback with the arm talent and the ability of Drew Allar, that's going to alleviate some of that because he's just going to throw guys open and that sort of thing. But, if you are able to add, say, a Dante Cephas, who it was extremely productive for Penn State, could easily go to the NFL right now if he wanted to, but is going to transfer for a year. And so you would also add Dante Thornton, and you could put those guys on the outside and slide Keandre Lambert-Smith to the slot where he's better suited. And then you mix in, a Trey Wallace and Omari Evans and Caden Saunders. And all of a sudden you're looking pretty deep there. So I think that's one thing, too, to watch these next few weeks with the transfer portal is, if Penn State's able to hit on some of these targets of theirs, and it seems like they're going to get at least some of them, that's just going to continue to add to this hype train as it rolls full steam ahead towards 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say Dante Cephas was a name I saw that was visiting camp, and it seemed like Penn State's in pretty good shape for him.
I should mention too. Sorry, Tim, real quick with Cephas, Pittsburgh native, went to Penn Hills High School where he was a high school teammate with current Penn State defensive back Daquan Hardy and running back Tank Smith. So, and anyone who knows the Pittsburgh high school football scene, Terry Smith knows absolutely everybody and has known absolutely everybody their entire lives. So I'm sure Cephas's relationship with Coach Terry is one that goes back quite a ways as well.
And I gotta say, it's kind of neat to see too, because he was a two-star recruit out of high school. So understandably, he ended up at Kent State. But for him to tear it up enough and then now have an opportunity to, maybe be the guy at a school that I'm sure he was dreaming of getting an offer from Penn State, and now he's got Penn State after him, hosting an official visit, where he can play his final year there donning the blue and white. What a way for him to end his college playing career before he goes on to a productive NFL career. And Dante Thornton, like you said, hopefully he'd be nice to get it. He seems like gives you a little height too, in addition to speed. He'd be a huge get if they can land him. I also saw that Jimmy Horn, Joe Horn's kid.
Yeah.
Florida.
I don't know if he visited this. I know he was trying to visit this weekend. I'm not sure if it came to fruition or not, but I mean, he would add some serious speed to the wide receiver room. And I mean, Southern schools are going to be on him. He's from the South. Colorado is supposed to get an official visit. But Penn State's definitely firmly in the mix of that one. I think his top 3 was Penn State, Colorado, and I can't think of off the top of my head, but I know somewhere down south that he also plans to visit. And he's supposed to announce on Christmas. So that's a good call, Tim. That's another name to watch at the portal receiver as well.
Well, as I saw, Colorado Coach Prime there now making some big moves on him. It sounds like it's pretty high on them. They might be the favorite at this point.
Yes. It's a good shot of it. I mean, with Colorado too, if Dante Cephas does not commit before leaving campus this weekend or shortly thereafter, they could be a school to kind of keep a tab on for him, because the Buffaloes did hire away Kent State's head coach Sean Lewis to be their offensive coordinator. So I'm not I don't know if there'd be interest there in his end. I mean, the kid might not want to. If you're going to play one more year in college to go to the NFL, you're probably part of that's going to be going to a school where you're going to get a lot of exposure and compete for a championship. And obviously you're not going to get that in Colorado next year, but just could be something to watch if he doesn't commit either this weekend or early in the week.
France 200 million. Yes, I just saw that. Allez Le Bleu. They're playing. I think they're playing Morocco now in the semifinals, so it'll be an interesting semi. I think Willie also said, "Yeah, you guys do a knowledgeable show and very little bias. Enjoy your reviews and reports of Penn State." Well, thank you for the kind words, Willie. I like to think, us writing for a Penn State blog, to think we at least know something about Penn State. Yeah, and the bias, but yeah, I guess we, obviously we're fans, so we're not going to hide that fact. But I think we also do try to be reasonable and fair and not overly homeristic. So I think we've done a pretty good job of that, but it's good to get acknowledgement like that from others. So thanks for that. Also says 12-team playoff will probably benefit Penn State much any college team. Oh yes. I keep seeing graphics put up that show how many times Penn State would have made the playoffs if it had been a 12-team thing from the start. And there were at least 3 seasons where it would have happened. I think 2016, 2016, 2017, and 2019. Actually, maybe even 2018.
Yeah, because 2018 they were. I mean, obviously things would be a little bit different in a 12-team playoff era, but in 2018, even going 9-3, they still finished 12th in the final college football playoff rankings, and obviously this year they would have been in as well. So, yeah, I mean, I've long said that there may not be any program in the country is going to benefit more from an expanded playoff than Penn State. I mean, I saw if you go back to when the BCS started in what was that 1998, I believe. Penn State, if you had done a 12-team playoff going back to 98, Penn State would have something like 15 playoff appearances already. So there are very few programs who are going to benefit more from it. And I mean, you can look at it a couple of different ways. On one hand, it shows you're one of the best programs in the country. On the other hand, it shows that you're still one of those so close yet so far away kind of programs where you're right on the cusp of taking that next step, consistently on the cusp of taking that next step and just haven't done it. But everything changes when you go to 12 teams. And as we've talked about a bunch today and in recent weeks, even with the 4-team setup next year, I don't think anyone's going to be surprised if we see Penn State break through next year and in the final year of the 4-team playoff get in, because I mean, on one hand, you and I, other Penn State fans, will be surprised because one of those I'll believe when I see it kind of things, because we know things tend to go somehow, some way go wrong. But on the other hand, you have every tool, every piece in place, all the talent needed. So it wouldn't stun me if that happened next year. But without a doubt, when they expand to 12 teams, there may not be a program in the country that will benefit from that more than Penn State.
No, absolutely not. And all right, we got a Utah fan in the chat. Go Utes. Remick, feel free to give us your take. Give us other names besides Cam Rising that Penn State fans should know of. I think Cam Rising is probably the one name on Utah that maybe non-Utah fans are aware of, but obviously they got a lot of other good guys in that team if they're having that much success. Let's see. If y'all want to update an Army Navy, there you go.
Yeah, and with Utah, one thing I'll be very intrigued too with the bowl game is now that he's announced he's coming back, do we see Olu Fashanu left tackle for Penn State? Utah has a very good defensive line, and you're going to want all hands on deck to deal with it. I mean, Drew Shelton more than held his own at left tackle, the true freshman, and filled in for Fashanu. But when you lose a guy, and it's no knock on Drew Shelton, because Drew Shelton could turn into this kind of player one day, but whenever your left tackle is an All-American who was projected to be the first offensive line, potentially the first offensive lineman off the board in April, maybe a top 5 pick. That's just a huge drop off from that kind of caliber player to almost anybody. So that's one thing I'll be very curious to see in the Rose Bowl is, does Penn State, that offensive line that was so banged up at the end of the year, are they healthy? Because if they are, and you can combine the amount of depth they're able to cultivate those few weeks with Drew Shelton, with a JB Nelson, with a Vig Ione, and you can do that while getting your injured players back, that could be big too in this bowl game, because not only are you going to be able to have Fashanu just anchor the line at left tackle, it gives you the ability to kind of rotate guys a little bit, which you don't want to do a ton on the offensive line, but you can do it enough to keep guys fresh, which in the fourth quarter, if you're able to keep your offensive line fresh, that obviously could go a long way, especially, if you're put in a position where, let's say, 5 minutes ago and Utah's punting it back to you and you're up by 4 or 5 and you need to drain the clock and kill it, if you have a fresh offensive line, that becomes a lot easier to do. But yeah, I think that was one thing to watch in the game, is if they're able to get Fashanu back from injury, that goes a long way too, because this Utah defensive line is a very good group. I mean, other than Michigan and Ohio State, probably the best defensive line Penn State will see this year. And Ohio State as a whole, I'm not convinced Ohio State as a whole has a better defensive line than Utah, but Ohio State has the better player in JT. But as a whole, this Utah defensive line might be better than Ohio State's.
Yeah, I think I remember reading like Utah does an excellent job of like getting sacked, getting pressure on the quarterback, and that's definitely gonna, I think if assuming if Olin Fashion is healthy, I would hope they would stick him back there in the starting lineup, because they're gonna need all hands on deck to handle that pass rush of the Utes, and of course, very important that they're able to establish that ground game with Singleton and Allen to keep the defense honest and not allow them to just pin their ears back and just have, rush 4 or 3 and just be able to get pressure that way. So, I mean, I see it just being like a real, I say to say it's not going to be the shootout we saw between Penn State and USC 6 years ago. Probably a little more low scoring, but a good back and forth, physical kind of rock fight of a game. And I think it'll come down to maybe the last couple possessions of the game to come up with a winner. So, I do expect to, be a good, exciting game to watch. Regardless, if you're a fan, even if you're not a fan of either team, like you're just like a fan of college football, I think this should be a entertaining game to watch. One of the more entertaining ones to watch. Let's see.
Absolutely, it should be a very entertaining game. And I think one thing I'll be very curious to watch also is, because you see this every year in bowl season, but again, carries a little bit different weight when it's the Rose Bowl and you're a team who you expect to be a preseason top 10 team next year. Who are going to be those breakout guys? I think back to 2014 in the Pinstripe Bowl, we saw Chris Godwin burst onto the scene with his breakout performance. 2015 in the Gator Bowl, Christian Hackenberg leaves with injury. Penn State's losing by 20-something points, and Trace McSorley nearly brings them back to win. And you see Trace's breakout game. There's always going to be that guy. I know I kind of mentioned earlier, but offensively, I wouldn't be surprised to see that big Keandre Lambert-Smith. All the talent in the world, a receiver, has yet to put it together, but seemed like he was starting to put it together at the end of the year, that big game against Michigan State. And defensively, I wouldn't be stunned if we see denied Dennis Sutton, who all year long just kind of flew under the radar, would make a splash play or two each game. It seemed like steadily got better. Wouldn't be shocked to see the 5-star put that 5-star talent to use in the Rose Bowl, and maybe come up with a big sack, a forced fumble, something like that could impact the game for Penn State.
Yeah, it's certainly a chance for some of the these freshmen or sophomore, just guys who maybe are kind of on the cuff of breaking out to actually have a breakout performance. So yeah, that's definitely another thing to keep an eye on. And just a quick reminder, I guess, see a bunch of tuning in. If you enjoyed just seeing here, and if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to our Penn State Voice of College Football channel. It's a channel we're trying to grow. Don't know how many subscribers we have at the moment. I know we're trying to get to 600 by the end of the year. So if you can help us get to that goal, like and subscribe. And also, you can see it here in the banner, BlackShoeDiaries.com. That's where Marty and I write for. So obviously football is kind of fading out a bit, but we're very much covering other sports. Marty and I help cover basketball team who we talked briefly about earlier, had a very nice win on the road today at a ranked Illinois team, kind of getting themselves back into NCAA tournament talk for now. And, but also wrestling, we've had great coverage for, and, we do weekly recaps on the hockey team, which has been having a great bounce back year after a couple down years. So it's, just because the football season's almost over, doesn't mean we're slowing down. So go check us out for all Penn State sports coverage. And like and subscribe to the Penn State Voice College Football channel. So check out some more comments here. There we go. Manny C says, Man Diaz is known for being aggressive on defense. Do you think it was too aggressive? Would you like to see him make adjustments where he perfectly fine the product that he produced?
I mean, I think with Manny Diaz, there were times this year it got frustrating for me. In the moment, you'd get frustrated because you'd have 3rd and long and he'd bring this blitz and it wouldn't get home, and then you get burnt and give him a first down. But then when you kind of sit back and you look at it from the macro point of view, and it's like, all right, I honestly can't tell you. I can't even think of the last time a Penn State defense forced as many turnovers as they did this year. Led the country in pass breakups. I believe they were like 2nd or 3rd in the country in tackles for loss. And by the end of the season, they were one of the best defenses in the Big Ten. And outside of the Michigan game, played really well against everybody they played this year. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things you got to kind of step back, look at it from the macro level. When it happens, like I remember against Auburn, there were a couple times they would bring these blitzes. They wouldn't get home. Guys would get upfield too far in their pass rush lanes and leave these big gaps for TJ Finley to just lumber away for 12 yards and a first down. But we saw how that game ended. So I don't have any issues with it. It also helps when you have a defense as talented as this one is. I will say, knowing how aggressive Manny likes to be, I am just absolutely thrilled to watch next season what he's going to do with Abdul Carter, because the limit, it's endless potential there of what you can do with Abdul Carter with this aggressive of a defense coordinator. So that should be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I would say I think at times maybe you're a little annoyed when he's bringing the blitzes on 3rd and long, and when it felt kind of unnecessary. But you know what? That's just Manny's DNA. I mean, that's his style. He wants to bring the pressure constantly, and I can't argue against the results. It's worked more often than not. And I say the thing is, being a high risk, high reward kind of system. You're going to give up big plays. You have to accept that. You're going to give some big plays, but you're also going to get some big plays out of your defense, which, it could be maybe you get an important pass, get an important sack, or just get in the quarterback's face and he throws an errant pass on 3rd down so you get off the field. Or, you force a fumble recovery, a scoop and score, you force an interception, a pick 6. So there's a lot of good things that come out of it too. As someone who just remembers watching all those bend but don't break defense that Tom Bradley and to a lesser extent Brent Pry had, it's kind of refreshing to have a defense that tries to set the tone like Manny does. So yeah, so you know what? You give me the excuse me. I say you can give me all the warts that can come with such a system, and but I'll take the successes that come out of it. I feel like the positives have outweighed the negatives of Manny's defense, and I'm glad that it seems like he's going to be back for another year. So I think next year could truly be a special one, and if it is, then I think he'll probably get some Power 5 head coaching offers at that point. So let's see who else is. So Utah isn't really a big play team. They're like a heavyweight fighter. Yeah, it kind of goes into what I was saying earlier. Like well, at least in the passing game, neither team has a real home run threat. Like they can be efficient enough, but they're really their home run threats are really in the run game. Whether I guess in Utah it can either be their quarterback or the running backs. In Penn State's case, it's definitely the running back, Singleton and Allen. So yeah, it probably will. It probably will look like a heavyweight fight, just given how the teams are kind of similar in strengths and weaknesses. So that's what I was saying before. It's not gonna be as high scoring as the last Rose Bowl Penn State played in, but there should be some points put on the board, and it won't be some like 9-6 kind of defensive slugfest, or a game that Sicko's committee is going to be tweeting about. Yeah, I think great account, by the way.
One of the best. Yeah, I agree. I don't expect it to be high scoring. I also don't expect it to be, like you said, like 9-6 or something like that. For anyone else out there who watched the 3A state championship game today in Pennsylvania between Bell Vernon and Newman Goretti that finished 9-8 with teams fumbling the ball inside the 1 yard line. And I don't think we're going to get anything like that, but it's not going to be 52-49 either, I don't think. Or if it does, I mean, at that point, I think both defense coordinators are probably just going to throw their game plans out the window and just get aggressive. And you know what? Go after the quarterback and try and force a turnover. But no, yeah, it should be a great game. I'm really looking forward to it. I mean, you're always going to look forward to the Rose Bowl. I look forward to the Rose Bowl every year. I don't care who's playing in it. It's always one of my favorite bowl games, one of my favorite things on the sports calendar every year. But when Penn State's in it, it just adds a little extra to it. And like I said, especially that last true traditional Rose Bowl, man, it's going to be fun.
Oh yeah, I can't. Let's see. Let's say it's the 10th of December as we're doing this. So we got 23 days. So 23 days, folks. It'll be here before you know it. Let's see. We haven't really touched on recruiting yet. I know we touched on transfer portal, but before we go to recruiting news, Marty, I know I saw could be some impending commits. I saw Mason Robinson, Northwestern commit, who's likely to flip to the Nittany Lions, and also Kavion Keys, linebacker from Richmond, Virginia, who is UNC commit, recently decommitted, and the crystal balls are pointing the Nittany Lions direction on this one. Also looks like there could be a Florida person or two that may flip come signing day. I saw Conrad Hussey made a Florida State visit, and it sounds like that went well. So keep an eye on that one. Obviously, though, you are the recruiting person at Black Shoe Diaries, so I'm sure there are others you can fill in the blanks on.
Yeah, this is a huge recruiting weekend this weekend for Penn State. We already mentioned Dante Cephas being on campus out of the portal, like you said, but from your traditional high school recruiting, you have Mason Robinson, who you mentioned, who from McDonough School in Maryland. For those who don't know, the McDonough School is very much a Penn State pipeline. PJ Mustapher, Curtis Jacobs, Devon Elise, denied Dennis Sutton. I think there might be one or two others I'm forgetting. I don't know the last time Penn State pushed for a kid from McDonough and didn't get them. People were surprised being committed to Northwestern over the summer. I expect him to flip to Penn State, if not on the visit this weekend, shortly thereafter. His senior film, man, it's impressive. He's not a four-star kid right now. That is going to change when evaluators watch his senior film. Joseph Mapoi, another defensive end originally from Africa, now attending St. Thomas More School in Connecticut, same school as current cornerback commit Zion Tracy. Mapoy is another guy I think Penn State probably wraps up this weekend. And, you mentioned Conrad Hussey visiting Florida State. It does appear that, King Mack, his teammate at St. Thomas Aquinas, fellow defensive back, he seems like Mack's pretty solid to Penn State. Same with Dakari Nelson, the safety out of Alabama, who there were some questions about earlier in the fall. Now Hussey, they're gonna be in a battle with Florida State from now to signing day. We'll see what happens. But if you're Penn State, to land as many commitments as they have this cycle from kids down south, especially with Florida State starting to get their act together again and not be a hot mess. If you can get the signing day and you sign all of them, that is incredible. Or even if you lose only one of them, that's still a pretty good recruiting job. As people who follow recruiting know, it doesn't matter where they're coming from, but when recruits are committed to schools that are as far away as Penn State is from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, the closer you get to signing day, sometimes a quarter of those feet get about signing with that school and being that far away, especially for kids who have spent their entire life living there. It's not like this is, say, Katron Allen, for example, last year, who came to Penn State from IMG Academy, but kid was originally from Virginia. Obviously, being at IMG, he was already used to being away from home, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's really, really good recruiting haul here for Penn State. Seems like they're going to finish strong. And of course, Kavion Keys, who you mentioned, he's been telling Penn State all the right things for a very long time and just never decommitted from North Carolina. He's on an official visit to Virginia Tech this weekend, but now that Keys has finally decommitted from North Carolina, I expect him to wind up in Penn State's class also. So assuming that happens, huge tip of the cap to Manny Diaz, who his first full cycle as defense coordinator, looks like he's going to land his top 3 linebacker targets in Tony Rojas, Tamir Robinson, and Kavion Keys. And that's one hell of a linebacker haul for Penn State. So, yeah, really strong close here for the Nittany Lions on the recruiting charts. And even if they lose Conrad Hussey, it's still going to look like it's going to be a strong close because you look like you're still going to add Mapoy and Keys and Flip Robinson. I think they'll continue to look for another offensive lineman after early signing day. You remember last year, Vega Ione wasn't even on their radar until January, and the kid looks like he's going to be an absolute stud for Penn State. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, really strong class. And, this is the best it's going to, assuming everything goes according to plan here these next few weeks, it's going to be the best back-to-back classes that James Franklin has signed. And hey, you start stacking that talent on top of each other. That's how you really start to turn into a team that can contend for the Big Ten and beyond.
Precisely. On that note, yes, Willie, happy holidays to all. Yeah, that's a good place to end it here. Hope everyone, guys, enjoy your holiday season, however you celebrate. The first bowl games start next Friday with the all-important Bahamas Bowl, which sadly is no longer sponsored by Popeyes. But it's an interesting way to start the bowl season now. I don't know if you're involved in any bowl pick'em pools, Marty. I'm involved in a couple, so I'm gonna have to start actually sitting down maybe this weekend and start, figuring out my picks. Maybe wait till later next week and get some guidance, and because I never really fare well in these bowl pick'ems.
I mean, I think they're difficult to do to begin with, but especially in the era of opt-outs and all of that, that makes it even more challenging.
You make a pick, and then you find out, like, 2 days before the game, that team you picked based on assuming so-and-so is going to play decides to opt out. It just
yes,
but things.
One thing I'm very excited for this year. A buddy of mine and I were going through and kind of putting together our little like sickos bowl games, big board, and if you don't get excited for New Mexico State and Bowling Green and the Quick Lane Bowl, or you don't get excited for UConn and Marshall and the Myrtle Beach Bowl, are you even really a college football fan? I don't think you are. So that's I get excited about that stuff as much as anything in bowl season. See these teams you don't see a lot of, you don't know much about. And for some of these kids, this is going to be, if you're a senior at New Mexico State, you're probably not going to the NFL, but this is a heck of a way to cap off your career. in a game like that. So good on them. I love bowl season. I don't want to hear people say there's too many. Put every team in a bowl game for all I care. I don't care. The more college football, the better. Bowls are so much fun. Coaches are emptying out the playbooks. You got kids doing stuff they would never get to do otherwise on the field. The players get rewarded. It's a little vacation for them. They're so much fun. They're great. It's one of the things that I hate with the playoff is kind of killing some of these bowl games. But man, bowl games are the best. I love. As a teacher, there's a few things I love more about Christmas break than just being plopped on my couch, knowing I don't have to work all week and I can just lay here and watch bowl games all day and mix in some college hoops. It's tough to beat.
Yeah, I kind of associate with all these random bowl games with the holidays, just
Yep.
like middle of the afternoon, either right before or after Christmas, and you're just, it's some, I don't know, it's the Monarchy Car Care Bowl between a couple teams, like you normally wouldn't care about, but maybe if you're having a bowl pick 'em pool or whatever, like,
Yep.
that kind of gets you to care about these things, especially if you put a whole bunch of points on one team to win it.
Absolutely.
So yeah. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Hope you enjoy your holidays. And Marty and I will be back here again January 2nd after the Rose Bowl to do our instant reaction show for that. Break it all down.
We'll throw out there too, early signing day for recruiting on December 21st. So I'm sure we'll probably sneak one show in between there and the Rose Bowl to talk Penn State's recruiting class and kind of put the finishing touches on that as well. So
yeah, we can do. Well,
you are interested in Penn State's recruiting class that will be coming in and learning more about them ahead of next season. Keep your eyes open for that because I'm sure we'll do that at some point.
Yeah, maybe do a quick show on recapping the recruiting class. So that, and of course, we'll do a recap of the Rose Bowl when that ends on the 2nd. So you'll keep an. That's why I have to tell you is subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, so you can get alerts for when we do go live for these things. And as always, you want to check out our work, blackshoediaries.com. Down there, it's a place to check us out. But just want to, thank you guys for tuning in all season long. We've enjoyed this ride, and we look forward to finishing off in spectacular fashion with the Rose Bowl in a few weeks. And we hope you all have a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever it is you celebrate. And we'll catch you soon.